This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
The year has so many different obstacles and ups and downs. For the most part, we've played really, really well. We had a couple hiccups. One, the first 7 games in the year, but we were dreadful. Another one, then we went on some big long spurts. And then we had one where I think we lost like 7-9 or something like that. And we were playing actually really well. It was just not working for us. And so we weren't getting rewarded. The last one we had was right out of the Olympic break. And again, that kind of reverted back to beginning of the year, we played dreadful. But I'd say that one losing streak we lost 7-9. I thought we deserved much better. This is probably, I don't want to say the opposite of it, because we're accruing points, and there's at times when we really deserve them. But if you take literally the first period of our last 5 games and bundle that up, it would be an elite video on how not to play hockey. The side note of that is then they really find a way after that, the final 2 to, pull themselves back into the fight, and then they've been rewarded. It doesn't usually work like that. We're in a pretty fortunate stretch. I've liked a lot of the things we've done, but our first periods have been
elite video. That was a great line. I started to chuckle when I heard that, of how not to play.
He said our first periods have been ...
Yeah.
Fill in the blank.
That's okay, though. It goes back to, I think, a theme of this show and a point we've tried to hammer home, that as much as you want to play a complete game, those are hard to do. That doesn't mean you still can't win games, even when you struggle. And look, the Lightning have struggled the last handful of games coming out of the gates in the first period. And last night's game was dreadful. I think Brian said the first 17 minutes for him was just terrible.
But for
that
both
happens.
teams.
But for both teams.
Last night was a little different, which we can get into.
But it gets into the notion that it is, how many games do you play a full 60 minutes? Or even 58, 55?
I've
those
heard
are
the
just
full
hard.
60 being channeled, though, by a number of players after these games.
And that's fine.
You got to play the full 60.
I think that's so ingrained.
The full 60.
I think that's so ingrained, though.
Yes.
It's just easy to say.
I think they're saying it just to annoy you.
Well, either that or, between that and the officials not picking up the broken stick on the ice, that annoys me a great deal. But nonetheless, the Lightning have now, pointed in 8 straight games?
6-0-2.
They're in first place now, tied with Buffalo, but they have the edge there. And think about the mood where everybody was just 10 days ago. Now, just like that, they're in first place. So we can dive into...
This stretch is shorter than their 3-7 coming out of the Olympic break.
Yeah.
So, they've turned it around in a fairly short period of time.
We can get into what we saw this weekend, because I think 2 different games. The Lightning defeated the Senators, probably the one that was most pressing and most important to the Lightning because of the divisional component to it, and the fact that Ottawa was playing extremely well coming in. We can get into that, and of course what we saw yesterday on home ice as well, the Lightning coming away with a 3-2 win over the Preds, a game in which they had 1 shot on goal at the end of 20 minutes.
Right.
So you want to begin with the Senators game, a trend where they fall behind again, partner, and had to battle back.
Well, let me actually start here. I'll take the 30,000-foot view. The Lightning are tired. They're a tired team. I think it's more mental than physical. I heard Chief in the last call last night, because this was brought up, and he's like, well, if they're so tired, how are they finding energy later in these games, which they are? I think they're getting engaged into the games. They're falling behind by 1, by 2, but at the start of the games have come so fast and furious since the Olympic break. We spelled it out, 27 games in 50 days.
Yeah.
And looking at the schedule, the Lightning do not have 2 days between games until the end of the regular season. So it's not going to let up. I understand they're on a homestand here, but they came home on Monday cross-continent, and they played Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. They have not had a chance to kind of – I think we're back on the right time zone. I talked about that earlier in the week. I don't think that's really an issue anymore. I just think they're drained. And they really had to dig deep to get out of the skid. So I think it's a combination of the frequency of games since the Olympic break ended, the fact that they really summoned some excellent play out on the West Coast. The first 3 of those games were 3 excellent performances by the Lightning and turned things around. And now we're finding that these games are a struggle in part because I think the Lightning are not dialed in mentally in many of these games at the beginning, but then they're getting engaged and getting invested and playing a lot better. There's a huge difference between what we're seeing in the first period, let's just say in the homestand, the first period in the homestand and the third period in the homestand. So I think a couple of things are going to happen. First of all, the Lightning are going to be clinching a playoff spot soon. I mean, I don't know exactly when. They're at 98 points. Steve's on top of the magic number. I believe there are a bunch of teams that can only get to 104. Most of those teams would lose the tiebreaker against the Lightning. It's possible that you had a whole bunch of teams at 104 and the Lightning might lose the tiebreaker. But those teams are not going to finish at 104. So I think within the next couple of games, particularly if the Lightning continue to get points, they will clinch a playoff spot.
Yeah.
So once they clinch a playoff spot, yes, they don't want to be the 8th seed. I'm sure that they don't. I'm sure they would like to finish as high as possible. But the urgency that they need for kind of getting points will diminish, which means that, I mean, maybe we will see a little load management. If they can fit some recalls under the cap, you're only allowed 4 recalls. I don't know if the Lightning have had any yet. The recalls that are emergency recalls don't count, but the Lightning really wouldn't be in a position to do an emergency recall. But some of the fans have talked about, resting a player here, resting a player there. Kucherov was under the weather, so he got the weekend off. I'm sure he would much rather played, but who knows if that's a net positive, even though Phil was like in disbelief that Kucherov wouldn't be playing, even with a fever. He's like, I've played with a fever before, because he's in this scoring race for the Art Ross, and missing a couple of games might affect how voters are going to vote for the Hart Trophy. Be that as it may, he didn't play Saturday or Sunday. He took that time off. I don't know if we're going to start to see that after the Lightning clinch a playoff spot. It isn't usually something that happens, but there's no relief here. Like, there's no relief in terms of the schedule. The other thing we might see is that the Lightning just kind of put it on cruise control, and maybe we get some ugly results as they're facing teams that are battling for a playoff spot. But if they've already clinched, it is more important that they get recharged somehow, some way. Their final game is going to be on April 15th. You will have at least 2 days off before the playoffs begin. And the other thing I'll mention is that most teams are in the same boat. I mean, most teams are also playing a very condensed schedule with lots of games, lots of back-to-backs, travel, etc. That's what I'm seeing from the Lightning. So whether it was Saturday's game against Ottawa, where they started very poorly at the beginning of the game, or the Sunday game against Nashville, where both teams didn't look good in the first period, or go back to the Minnesota game where they fell behind the 8 ball early, or even some other games where, like, they started well in Calgary, they got the lead, they just didn't, have a good end of the first period. And we actually felt that they started okay against Seattle. They didn't really make Seattle overly uncomfortable, but they had the puck a lot at the beginning of that Seattle game. So those games, they didn't actually start as badly as in some of the others, but in all these games, they've fallen behind. That is an indisputable fact. And until last night's game, they had fallen behind by multiple goals in 4 straight, rallied to get points in all of those games. Last night, they fell behind 1-0, got the game tied, and never trailed again. So I think that some of this will get worked out after the Lightning clinch a playoff spot, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. That's my hope anyway. That's what I'm seeing. Because so Coop gave a very intricate answer there, talking about what he's seeing from the team. He's like, on the one hand, these first periods have been dreadful, but he's like, on the other hand, we're actually playing some really good hockey later in games. So how are they playing the really good hockey later in games? They're getting emotionally invested, engaged, they're raising their level. That's the Lightning team that we want to see in the playoffs. So the fact that, like, they're down, they're trying to come back, maybe they're raising their level and they're just not playing that well, still would be more of a troubling sign. I'm seeing really good hockey in the second half of all of these games from the Lightning. And this is the last point I'm just going to make kind of overall to this point in the homestand. 4 games during the homestand have been played. In all 4, the Lightning have been tied going into the third period. As much as they've been down earlier in the games, all 4 of the games have been tied going into the third period. And look at the goal differential in the third period of those games. Until Nashville scored last night, the Lightning not allowed a goal in the third period during the homestand, if I'm remembering right. I know that they've been tied in all of these games. Against Minnesota, they scored 3, right, and won 6-3. The Seattle third period was scoreless, but they outplayed Seattle. Against Ottawa, they broke the tie and, ended up winning. And then last night, they gave up a goal after they scored, and they got the goal right back. So I'm seeing excellent play in the third period. Yep. And to me, like, you don't want to get off to a bad start in a playoff game, but in a playoff game also, when it's tied going into the third period, like, that's when the rubber meets the road. Like, how are you going to play when you're tied late in the game? Are you taking care of your business? And for the most part, the Lightning have done a very, very good job, even as we're talking about their bad starts, with how they are playing in the third period of all of these games. And they're the ones who are making the play, or maybe the extra play, to get points and turn these games into wins, except for the Seattle game, which honestly they could have won that. That might have been their most dominant third period of all of them. And what was I saying? The attempts were like 24-7 Lightning in the third period against Seattle. It's just they couldn't beat Grubauer, and that happens sometimes. So yes, we can circle back to the 2 games this weekend. I thought the regulation win over Ottawa was a huge victory, because that's really a 4-point swing. And the fact that they won in regulation meant that they gained 2 points on Ottawa, pushing the Sens 10 points back, now 12 points back. I mean, Ottawa may make the playoffs, but they're not catching the Lightning. I mean, they're 12 points back. They have 9 games left. You can do the math right there. Mm-hmm. So, that was a big step forward for the Lightning to make sure that one of the teams behind them was not going to be able to catch them. And we're seeing some other results. Teams are dropping games in overtime of the shootout, maybe an odd regulation loss here, although most of the teams in contention are still winning. And, I think it's going to happen soon. I don't know if it's going to happen by, tomorrow. that would take quite a series of events. It probably won't happen by tomorrow, but certainly by the weekend. I think the Lightning, if they win a couple more games, based on what happens in the out-of-town scoreboard, they may be able to get to a point where they get that X next to their name.
The other thing, too, is they won a couple of games without their best offensive player, and I think at times that showed. Nikita Kucherov out with an illness. Nick Paul was on Saturday, came back on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But you could tell the power play was just out of sync, and how much just goes through Kucherov. If you didn't think he had a big investment or big impact on the team, just take a look at the 2 games, specifically where they were on the power play. And
when you're tired, though, and I'm talking about mental fatigue, your execution, which is so important in the power play, will be affected. And I think there was some of that. At least over the weekend. They didn't score a power play goal over the weekend. Earlier in the homestand, though, they did score power play goals. The power play helped them in the comeback against Minnesota and in the comeback against Seattle.
No doubt.
But, of course, Kucherov played in those games.
For sure. For sure. And so that, you talk about the 30,000-foot view, that stood out. I thought the goaltending was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And Johansson, I think, needed that game.
Yeah.
You and I talked about it, and me specifically, that, look, I'm a big fan of his play, but I think he's been put in some positions, whether you think it's his fault or not, where, that goals against and that save percentage aren't great. And at some point you want to rectify that a little bit. And I think that was an important game for him to get. He makes a big save on Stamkos at the beginning.
He made
which
a big
set the
save
tone
in the first period on Stamkos. He, like we talk about Did he give up a bad goal? How many of these goals are on him? The 2 goals he allowed yesterday were not on him. I mean, the one, Kemmel barrels into him and he gets pushed into the net, and the other was a double deflection.
Yep.
Now, Matthew Wood hit the post, could have tied the game in the third period during a Nashville power play. That was as close as the Predators came to tying it. But Johansson had a more manageable game, too. I mean, think of the scoring chances he has had to deal with in some of these other starts where, he's making saves on some of them, just not all of them. Last night was a more manageable game. I think the Preds did eclipse 30. I think they might have finished with 31. They had a push in the last 10 minutes because they were down. Like, we need points. They were in wild card 2. And I think it showed that they raised their urgency level in the last 10 minutes. But even then, they got some shots. Other than the Wood chance, I'm not sure that any were super dangerous. It was just so, I mean, we can start with Sunday's game. The Lightning have had this crazy busy schedule. They went out west. They came back, no time to catch their breath, basically. They've been chasing, in a lot of these games. So even though it was a back-to-back with both games at home, and the Saturday game was 1 o'clock and last night's game was 5 o'clock, so they had more than 24 hours, they still look like a team that was drained. Nashville has not had as busy a schedule as the Lightning since the Olympic break ended. No team has been as busy as the Lightning, but they've been busy enough. And they went on a 5-game winning streak you got to push. You win 5 in a row to climb up the standings. That's a push. They get to wild card 2. And since then, they've lost now 3 in a row, all in regulation. And their game against Montreal, so they played Saturday at home. It was a 6 o'clock local start time, 7 o'clock Eastern. You can't have more than less than 22 hours between games. So that game had to be played at 7 o'clock Eastern in Nashville. But, I mean, even still, like, they had to travel. It's probably about a 2-hour flight. I mean, they got in pretty late on Saturday night, Sunday morning. They had to come back and play the Lightning at 5. And they had a flat game against Montreal. Andrew Brunette was saying after, he's like, we just lacked urgency in this game. You might be like, how can they lack urgency? They're in wild card 2. They're holding on by their fingernails, and it can happen. They've been pushing and pushing and pushing. They climbed up the standings. I mean, even going back to late November, early December, they were dead last in the NHL. So they've gone on some kind of a run. It's been more of a slow burn, and then they got hot, right? So they got to wild card 2, but inevitably, it's almost like you get over the hump and you're into the top 8, and maybe you just exhale a smidge. And they lost a close game at home to the Devils, and Montreal can skate you out of the building. And it sounds like that's what happened on Saturday. Like their transition game, their speed, they jumped all over Nashville, and they were up 4-0 late in the third. Preds got a late goal, so it was 4-1. So they looked drained. That first period was ugly. Capital UGLY, all 4 in caps. Ugly. Neither team could make a play. The Preds ended up having a better, cosmetically speaking, first period statistically, because they had, 10 shots, I think, and 20 shot attempts. But, I mean, they probably could have gotten more scoring chances. They just couldn't, they connected 3 dots, and then they needed to connect a 4th, and, a guy fumbled a puck, right? The Stamkos one you mentioned was their best chance.
Yeah.
And even Stammer, we've seen him zip that puck harder. And, I mean, he shot it. It was a good save by Johansson, but we've seen Stammer be more dangerous, honestly. You can make the argument that the best scoring chance came on the Lightning side. It didn't count as a shot on net, but Hagel, off the rush, hit both posts. He hit the inside of one post, across, off the inside of the other post, and out. So turnabout is fair play, because the Lightning didn't get that one, and Wood didn't get the one in the third period. The second period was better. I think it was better for both teams, but it was only marginally better. I mean, I know the chatter after the game, Greg, was like, from the Lightning, we had a horrible first period, and then the final 40 were better. I think if we had a collective conversation after the second period, what do you think of this game so far?
Yeah.
Most people would be like, this is a really ugly game. The second period didn't really get nicer. Both teams scored a goal. I guess it was fitting that the Nashville goal was about as ugly as the game had been. So Chernak knocks down Kemmel on a partial breakaway. Kemmel and the puck slide into Johansson, and Kemmel, Johansson, and the puck go into the net. Now, if Kemmel just fell, that's not a goal. But there was a penalty on the play. It's kind of like the goalie interference rule where the attacking player, if he's pushed in by the defending player, no goalie interference in the blue paint. This is kind of the same deal where they said Chernak caused the contact. So the goal was ruled to be okay. Fortunately for the Lightning, they got the game tied about 5 minutes later. Radish took a shot. Yossi tries to block, and it bounces off him and comes right to Gensel as an open net. So you're 1-1 going into the third. Yes, both teams played better, I think, than what we saw in the first, but they weren't playing well. Then in the third period, the Lightning kicked it into gear. And, I mean, if you want to hear the stats about how the third period was different for the Lightning. So through 2 periods, they had 12 shots on net and 33 total attempts. In the third period, 16 shots on net and 31 attempts. So they almost equaled their total number of attempts in the third period as what they produced in the first and second combined, and they did outshoot their total in the third. They were just emotionally engaged, and they were all over Nashville in the early minutes. They had long sustained shifts in the offensive zone. They had a power play. Power play ended. Preds couldn't get the puck out. Gensel strips O'Reilly, who's one of their, best players and certainly a very reliable defensive player. Gensel took it off the wall, fed Hagel, who had 2 chances earlier on that same shift. Hagel makes a move and shoots it in. So the Lightning get the lead 2-1, and the next shift, Preds bring it into the Lightning zone, a seeing eye shot from the point. I mean, is this a huge mistake? I mean, somebody needed to tie up Forsberg's stick, but the Preds got a little bit of a break there, and that was really their only pass in the offensive zone until kind of the halfway point of the third period. And the Lightning came right back and was like, push, 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 push. Another long offensive zone shift. What a weekend for Lilleberg, huh? Lilleberg gets open, skates to the circle, throws it to the middle. It kind of bounces off Gensel to Perry at the back post. He stuffs it in, and the Lightning had the lead back, and this time they weren't going to give it up. As I said, I thought the Preds did elevate and pushed in the last 10 minutes. Because they pushed, they gave up some counters too. Lightning were missing the net. So, I mean, you can do the math. They had 16 shots on net, 31 attempts, though. So 15 attempts didn't go on net in the third period, and a lot of those were missing the net, where they had to look and put it over the net, actually. But they got the game across the finish line. So the third period was just much better hockey, really on both sides, but the Lightning outplayed Nashville in the third period. And a stark contrast from the first 2. But again, it took them that much time to kind of tap into whatever they needed to tap into to get their game to the level that they need to have it at. But what we've seen from this Lightning team since they turned things around, when they reach that level, the other team has a very difficult time coming up with an answer. Even Minnesota, which, look, I think Minnesota's a great team. I thought that was a high-quality game. We said it after that game. In the third period, the Lightning outplayed the Wild. They got a break on the Chernak goal, for sure, but they were the better team in the third period of that game. They've been the better team in the third period of all 4 games during the homestand.
Yep.
And when you're tied going into the third and you're the better team, usually that means you're going to come out on top. Against Seattle, it didn't happen because neither team could score. But we saw that again last night. The Lightning were the better team in the third period.
They were. And 4 points that are going to go a long way, which we've seen. Other teams are beating themselves up. We're going to see a really impactful team on Tuesday who's playing well and have some dynamic players. Emil Lilleberg had himself a big game over the weekend. 3 points, the one with the goal, which I thought was huge. Jake Gensel continues to provide just a steady presence. Kucherov's their most dynamic player. I don't know if you'd say Gensel's their most consistent performer, but maybe you could say that. I mean, consistently great is how I'd probably put Jake Gensel.
Right.
And I'm not sure. It's interesting because essentially, you had the 2 players who are somewhat related to each other on Sunday, Jake Gensel and Steven Stamkos. Because I think, Stamkos probably wanted that contract that Gensel eventually signs with the Lightning, didn't get it, And I think part of that was because the Lightning just were more comfortable with his age and where he was than giving that.
They
number
are
to
different
Stamkos.
players. I mean,
different for sure.
I think that we took great pains to mention that. And again, revisiting this, the Lightning would have liked to have had Stamkos back, just not at the contract number and term that Stamkos wanted. That's why you have a negotiation. They couldn't reach an agreement, but it's not like they said, we want to replace Steven Stamkos with Jake Gensel. I think in a perfect world, Julian would have loved to have both players on the team.
Very rarely you replace one Hall of Famer with another, but that may end up happening because I think Jake Gensel, if he continues this stretch for another 5-6 years, Dave, at 35, 40 goals, he's going to be hitting 500 plus, and that's usually a sweet spot. Stammer, best goal scorer, one of them in our generation. We've seen that, the last 25 years. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, and kudos to him. You made a point to bring this up in the pregame. Probably a big reason why Nashville turned it around was Stamkos' play. I think he had was he leading the league in game-winning goals with 10?
Yeah, that and his surge from late November. So the stats for Stamkos, he had a horrible start.
Yeah.
1 goal in 14 games to start the season. One of those games came against the Lightning when the teams met in Nashville. And even going to late November, he'd played 22 games with 4 goals. Since then, 32 goals.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it was in 53 games, maybe.
Yeah.
52 games.
We call that a heater.
And he didn't score last night, so add a game to it. But, Nashville, right around that time that, he got hot, they were last in the league.
Yeah. So and look, Nashville was also a team that a lot of people were picking because they got off to such a slow start to trade away some of their veterans. They did
make some trades. I mean, they traded Blankenberg. They traded Michael Bunting. They traded McCarron, who we saw in Minnesota. But
they kept the guys that
continued to do pretty well.
Right. And they kept the guys that the bigger names, and they kind of just said, okay, let's see how this plays out.
Yeah.
And to their credit and to his credit, they performed. But I thought it was an interesting moment on Sunday, 2 players that can almost be linked with one another.
Stammer had a pretty good game. I mean, it wasn't a clean game. It wasn't. Yeah. But I was liking, I really haven't seen him play that much. I've only seen him play. I don't think he's played in any preseason games. I know he didn't last year. I don't think he played in either preseason game this year because they always play each other twice. So I've only seen Steven Stamkos play 4 times in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
This was as dynamic as he has looked. So I think it's clear that he has found his place in Nashville. He spent, 16 years in one place? And now, he's going to someplace new city, new schools for his kids, right? Like new teammates, new role, everything. The team struggled last year, and it's clear based on his production that he is kind of settled in, right? And he's doing what he can do. He just looked more comfortable, honestly, last night than in the other 3 games that I've seen him play against the Lightning. And he had the chance on that first period look, but overall, it was not a great game for either team. But hopefully Stammer can have a good finish for Nashville. They have a weird end of season schedule, so heading to last night's game, they had 9 games left. 6 on the road, 3 at home. They were playing all 6 in a row on the road. So they played the one road game against the Lightning. They went home after the game, and in a day or 2, they are flying out to California. Now, look, Nashville has to go out to California more than once a year because they're in the West. But their schedule is really unusual. This is their schedule of their remaining 8 games. The first 5 on the road. At Kings, at Sharks, at Kings again, at Ducks, at Mammoth. And then they come home for Minnesota, and then they have the Sharks and Ducks again at home. So you look at teams that are around them. The Kings are close. The Ducks are close. Utah is ahead of them. I'm not sure if that's really in the cards for them, but they've got some playoff teams in there. They've got Utah and they got Minnesota, and they've got Anaheim, which is in first place in the Pacific Division, and they've got 4 games against 2 teams that are right behind them, basically in the standings. So they are going to have, if they get in, they will have earned it. That's what I want to say, and we'll see if they can do it. If they take care of some business in some of these head-to-heads with the Kings and Sharks, that will help them a lot. But the 2 games against LA are both on the road. Phil was saying he thinks the Kings have the inside track. He must have heard something about their remaining schedule. They must have a lot of home games. What I know about the Kings is they are losing the wild card to like every team. They just don't have a lot of regulation wins. So if they get in, they're going to have to finish with more points. But they're probably glad that they have these 2 head-to-heads at home with Nashville.
Yeah.
Anyway, you talk about a weird schedule, condensed schedule. I mean, that's a lot of travel in a time zone that is 2 time zones away from where they're used to being. Anyway.
I think they're a good team. I don't know. I'm talking about Nashville. There's nothing sexy about that team.
Yeah.
I don't know how far they could go in the playoffs.
Well, if you get wild
in.
card 2, you're getting probably Colorado in the first round. If it's not Colorado, it's Dallas.
By the way, do we want to talk quickly about Torts going to Vegas and Vegas firing a coach?
Yeah. So I was reminded the Devils did this. And I'm trying to remember the coach they fired. Was it Robbie Ftorek?
Yes.
Was it Ftorek? Okay.
Yes. I feel like that was a long time ago, though.
Yeah. So the
right.
Devils. So we remember the Devils had the great run with Brodeur and the trap and everything else, and like they just suffocated you and wouldn't let you score. So they won 3 cups in 9 years. They won in 95, and then they won 2 more cups subsequently. But they had a tough stretch from 95 until 2000. I think they missed the playoffs. I mentioned that the next year when the Lightning got in. Andreychuk played for the team for 3 years. And he was like, we had some years where we finished in first place and got knocked out in the first round. So they really underachieved for a stretch of time after they were a little bit of an upstart winner for the Cup. Like they were up and coming, but I think most people felt they beat Detroit. They swept Detroit in 95. Most people felt Detroit was favored to win that series. So anyway, they're in 99, 2000, and I think they're in good shape to make the playoffs. And Lou Lamoriello fires Robbie Ftorek with like 10 games left and brings in Larry Robinson, and the Devils go on to win the Cup. I don't think Robinson stayed very long. I'm trying to remember when he was there. But the next year they got to the Cup final again, lost to Colorado, and then in 2003 they won their 3rd Cup during that stretch of time. That was a great run, but it started with this bold move by the GM, and it's very unusual to see something like this happen, which is why I remembered it, right? And I even saw, I think Pierre LeBrun did an article about it, like referencing this late season coaching change. And look, everything came up roses for the Devils. They won the Cup. Let's see what happens with Vegas. What we've heard about Torts in recent years is that he can be very hard on young players. I think he's always been difficult for young players because he's trying to teach them. I think it comes from a good place. He's trying to teach them the way they need to play at the NHL level. I mean, he and Vinny LeCavalier had their dust-ups when Vinny was much younger, right? And Torts took over as head coach. But we certainly heard that during some of his time in Philadelphia, I think. So what we can say about Vegas is they really do have a veteran team. And, Eichel played for him at the Olympics. Torts was an assistant under Sullivan. So he has some familiarity, certainly, with some of the players. But, if you've got veteran guys, you got Theodore, you got Braden McNabb, you got Eichel, you got Marner. I mean, I don't know. It may be a good fit where the Vegas Golden Knights are like, we want a coach who has won before to come in this unusual situation and try and get our veteran guys going, because Vegas has had a nightmare since the Olympic break ended. And I don't know that situation well. Yeah. Reading some of the comments, it sounds like Cassidy kind of was very effective for a period of time, and then kind of the shelf life ran out, and it was time to
I was going to say, there was an article today in The Athletic that I think reminded us all how quickly, or trigger happy, maybe is the wrong word, that Vegas has been over the years with players and coaches who you wouldn't think otherwise would be on the hot seat. And a couple of examples, Gallant was one of them. Obviously, Marc-Andre Fleury, moving on from him and, changing up the goaltender position a little bit more. So, I mean, remember the big kerfuffle with his agent.
He was playing
Vegas.
less. It's not like he was their main guy, though, when they moved
Right.
on from him. At first, he lost ice time.
So interesting. You don't see this happen quite frequently at all. But the other thing, too, is Torts was part of the USA coaching
That's what
staff.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's
maybe
not
there
like
was some of
Vegas
that.
has a ton of. I know Eichel. I'm trying to think if there are any others. The fans can probably let us know. I mean, Theodore played for Canada. Marner played for Canada.
What was Hannafin? Was he?
Hannafin would have been on that team. You're right.
Yeah,
Yep.
maybe. So
Yep.
that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
And maybe this is just let's
They're
get Lightning a
veteran
bottle.
guys, though. So
Yeah.
I mean, they may be open to, if they're really like spiraling down the drain here, and they're like, we need to turn things around. They may welcome, Torts' voice. But good for Torts. I'm really happy for him, and
We'll see how it plays out.
We'll see how it plays out. I mean, they are in kind of the pillow fight division, right? So if somebody can, I'm channeling my inner Connor McDavid here. The Oilers have started playing better since they lost to the Lightning, but you get a feeling that division is kind of up for grabs. If Vegas can kind of catch a spark. I mean, they were a first-place team in that division for most of the season. So it's not like they changed a bunch of personnel. It's the same personnel.
So interesting. Just wanted to point
Yeah.
that out. We talk about the Lightning and any issues people perceive to have. There's the Vegas Golden Knights who continue to
They
muddle
have
along.
played objectively bad hockey, though, for the most part, since the Olympic break ended. I know that they had a big win in Dallas where they badly outshot the Stars and they won convincingly, but I haven't really paid attention to what's been going on since then, and maybe they stumbled again. Let's touch on Ottawa.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I've been a big fan of the Senators, talking about like how impressed I am with them. I watched them quite a bit when the Lightning were out in Western Canada because the games were on TV, and I really liked what I saw. They're in big trouble as far as their blue line is concerned, though, because Shabbat is going to miss the rest of the regular season, and if they get into the playoffs, at least a portion of the playoffs, it sounds like Nick Jensen is done for the year. Like,
that's tough.
If they even if they make the playoffs and go all the way to the final, he wouldn't be back. I may be wrong about that. I just saw out for the season. And maybe their most important defenseman is Jake Sanderson, who's a terrific player. He has missed, I think the Lightning game was his 11th game missed, and he is close to returning. I actually saw him in the press box, when I came out during the intermission. So he was in street clothes, and we'll see. They need him back because their forward unit is quite impressive, really. I mean, they have really good players at forward, and we saw how they can take over a game. At the beginning of that game, the Lightning weren't playing well, but Ottawa was. And then when the Lightning got the lead on the Lilleberg goal, which, came about halfway through the third period or so. The Lilleberg goal, I have the game sheet here. Lilleberg scored not quite 9 minutes in. Ottawa pushed. Ottawa made a push, and they elevated. Lightning had a lot of D-zone time, a lot of D-zone faceoffs. They repeatedly iced the puck. I thought the Lightning navigated that pretty well and minimized dangerous chances against, unlike earlier in the game. But I think Ottawa is going to need to win more than it loses still, and Sanderson cannot come back soon enough for them.
Right.
Let's just put it that way. I mean, I thought Clevin had a solid game. Like, he was doing what he could, but he's not normally a top pair defenseman with Zub. Zub is a top four for them.
Yeah.
But Zub doesn't have the offensive capabilities of Sanderson. And
That's fair.
I mean, they had the rookie Yakimchuk on the power play. I mean, he's playing his fourth NHL game. Normally, Shabbat would be out there if it wasn't Sanderson, right? Or Jensen. Jensen's an offensive defenseman. So, I mean, just everything is messed up. These are significant, major injuries for Ottawa. And, I wouldn't be surprised if Sanderson plays 30 minutes a game when he comes back. They're just going to, lean on him to do what they can to have success and win some games. Their schedule is not unfavorable. I think they have a lot of home games left. I think they might only have 3 road games remaining, and one of them is coming up against the Panthers tomorrow, I think. So as much as I am impressed with Ottawa, I'm not certain that their injury misfortune may work against them. It hasn't to this point. I mean, they've been playing quite well, even still. What did they lose to Pittsburgh in a shootout? So they got a point. Then they lost to the Lightning in regulation, a game that they had a lead. We'll see how they do. But I watching them, I'm like, they really missed their stud defenseman, plural.
It's hard to overcome that.
Very hard to overcome it. Yeah.
And we've seen that.
I mean, it would be like pulling Makar off Colorado or Quinn Hughes off Minnesota. Sanderson, everything runs through Sanderson. And if you don't have him, okay, you have a Shabbat who has played big minutes before for you. Now you're pulling him out.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It is. And, those are dynamite players, you know, to a degree. So you need them. And, maybe the Lightning got them at a good time. Who knows?
Yeah. Columbus has exhaled a little bit too. They were the other team that was rolling right along. And, they got goalied, it sounds like, against the Islanders. They lost 1-0. They gave up a late goal. They were tied, close to getting at least a point. They gave a late goal to San Jose at home, like in the last 90 seconds. And then they had a 3-0 lead on the Bruins yesterday at home going into the third, and they ended up losing in a shootout. Those are crucial points dropped by Columbus. So, look, they went on this huge run, right? Everything was working for them. They were winning close games. They were making the big play. They were getting the big save. And then it's like, that's hockey, right? Like, there isn't a team, maybe the Canadiens, 76-77, they lost 8 games all year. There were ties then. But, I mean, there isn't a team around, won 75 of 82 games.
Yeah.
Like, eventually things start to balance out a little bit.
Yep.
They may still get in, but I mean, I don't know if they have like a 9-1 in their forecast to close out the regular season. Now they've started to, hit some speed bumps.
Do we want to get to some questions here?
Yeah, we had a lot to cover.
We did. There was a lot happening, and if we missed anything, I'm sure our audience will break it all down. Carl said, heard in section 308, ref, check your phone. I think you missed a call. I had, I don't know, do we want to address this here? People were confused about why Chernak left the game.
He got a
misconduct, but it was because he, didn't go to the penalty box.
That's what Phil thought.
Right away? Is that?
Maybe he chirped. Hard to know from up top.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, I read Eric had a note that he thought there were a couple of calls missed on Nashville. I mean, it happens. It wasn't a non-penalty game. Both teams had 4 power plays. And we had the play with Chernak where the puck went in the net that they were going to call a penalty on that one,
Chief really didn't like that one. Carl adds a little bit more thoughts on the Chernak 10-minute misconduct. Penalty was already called, was going to the bench to get a new stick before the box. Ref tried to stop him. Chernak lightly shoved him, and the penalty was called.
So Phil's point was, if that's what happened, because Phil was watching that, he's like, he was upset with Chernak. He's like, Chernak should know better. Go to the penalty box. Someone will bring you a stick. And we've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
So he felt the onus was on Chernak and not on the officials. But
Michael,
that's Phil's opinion. I wasn't really aware of all of that happening.
Michael said, "Happy Monday, Dave and Greg. Life is good after a 2-win weekend. Go Bolts." Greg says they just look tired.
Well, at the beginning of these games,
yeah.
Yes.
Andrew says, how do they eliminate that mental fatigue? Will the 4 to 5 days before the postseason give them a little time to get dialed in and have a refresh of sorts?
Well, they're not going to have 4 to 5 days. I mean, if they start on Saturday, that's 2 days.
Yeah.
Abusive officials. Thank you, Steve, for the 10-minute misconduct. It's such a
abuse.
I mean, I know that's the verbiage, but that really sounds
abuse the official.
Flagrant, doesn't it?
I know.
No, there's really not going to be any major break. But no team is going to have a major break.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. If the Lightning can get home ice, they will finish Monday and Wednesday of the final week of the regular season at home. So they won't be getting on an airplane for a little bit. And, sleeping in your own bed can help.
Well, and assuming they have guys available here, I mean, who do you sit? Who looks
The
tired?
load management question.
Yeah,
well,
looks-
I mean,
who
look, if
looks
we're into the
tired?
last week of the regular season and they're
Yeah.
kind of locked into where they are, and they're just like, let's give some guys a little time off. It's possible for game 82 against the Rangers that some key guys sit. If that's the case, then the fan is right. You're looking at Monday to Saturday for those players. I don't think the goaltending has looked tired, though. Like, people were asking about Vasilevsky. I don't think that he has looked worn down, but, he's not skating up and down the ice either. Although you could make the argument that, the mental challenge of playing high-level goaltending is very taxing, and he's played a lot.
Correct. We'll see. We'll see. Load management, I think, is always a good way to put it. Bullard says, when a player of Kucherov's caliber is not playing, is he analyzing on what the team is without him, or do you think he relaxes and becomes a fan?
Well, if he's running a fever at home or whatever his illness was, I mean, he may have been, literally laid up in bed. I mean, Phil felt that he had to be pretty sick to miss these games this weekend. But I'm sure, look, when players miss time, they follow what's going on. They watch the games.
I'm sure he was watching. Look, you can have a fever and sit on the couch and watch the TV. if that's what was happening. Is he taking
like, if
notes?
I had only been out there on the power play, I would have made this pass.
I would have made it happen, and it is what it is. But I'm sure he was watching it. I'm sure he probably felt like he could have made a difference. Who knows? Summit says, if these games were important, would Kuch and Paul have played?
Look, I think they are important. I mean, the Lightning haven't clinched a playoff spot yet, and Paul did play on Sunday. I think that they were sick, and they couldn't play.
Is he meaning, like, maybe the better way to phrase that, if this was a playoff game? I think that would be
Who knows?
how I would phrase that. Because you're right. I mean, you could make the argument this was a very important 2 games, for sure, and I buy it. But we also know there's a difference between a playoff game and regular season game number 72. So let's be fair with that. Eric says, good afternoon, Dave and Greg. What do you think of the Predators' second period goal? I understand why they allowed, but do you agree that calling that goal was a stretch because Johansson didn't have a chance to make the save? I thought a penalty shot would have been fair.
Did I save the ruling? We got an email.
This is the one where Chernak pushes
with Chernak. Let me see if I can find
the player in.
So I think I deleted it, so I'm going to have to look for it here. All right, thank you, Steve. Steve found it. Video review confirmed the puck completely crossed the Tampa Bay goal prior to the net coming off its moorings. So there were 2 things they were looking at then. If the net had come off the moorings before the puck completely crossed the line, even if Kemmel had, the penalty would have still been in effect. They would have said no goal. If the net came off the moorings before the puck completely crossed the line, then they say no goal. But because Kemmel was not, quote unquote, responsible for the contact, Chernak was, the team that initiates the contact has to kind of eat the result. That's the rule.
Right. Makes sense. I mean, I know a lot of fans are...
Maybe not to Lightning fans who are on the wrong end of that call, but I mean, it's very tough on the goalie because Johansson can do nothing. He's on his knees, he's on his pad. Somebody barrels into him. It's ice. He's going to slide backwards.
That is correct. There's no doubt about that. So, by the way, that kid who scored his first goal, I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah. We've seen him in the preseason, and even
good.
I was talking with Dave Randorf and Brian Engblom pregame, and they remembered seeing him in the prospect tournament. I think they'd done a game. So he is a first-round pick. He's a prospect. That was his first NHL point. Yeah. He just hasn't played a lot in the NHL, but he's a prospect. I think he's been pretty effective. Their AHL team is in Milwaukee. He's been an all-star at the AHL level before. And we saw him. He was shooting the puck in the third period. Then he took that hit to the head from Gore, where they didn't call a penalty, which I think was the right call because Kemmel, lowered his head.
He did. He lowered it. I think there's a difference.
I'm not sure we saw him again after that, so hopefully he's okay.
Good point by you. Timmy says, JoJo had a great game. Nice to see. By the way, can I make an observation? I know there's been a lot of talk about the fatigue factor, and maybe it just hit me with all of the stuff that's been going on.
Well, I brought it up at the beginning of the
No,
program.
but I mean, it's been like Coop's been talking about it. Other people have been talking about the condensed schedule. I actually am less sympathetic to all of this because I think this is a direct or indirect product of wanting to play in the Olympics this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to hear that as an excuse. And I know they're tired, but it's almost like you asked for it. Like you asked to play in the Olympics, not
Right.
just John Cooper and the Lightning. The Players Association wanted it. I don't want to hear that they're fatigued, they're exhausted, and the players and the coaches say the same thing. I don't think the players are going to say too much of that. Coaches probably to defend their players, but that's a hard one to hear because you wanted that this badly, and I get that.
And I actually think it's not a byproduct of the players who went to the Olympics because that was that Kucherov, anti-Kucherov argument about like, well, you had the rest. I think it's about the condensed schedule that is a result of the Olympic break.
And keep in mind, it affects also the players who didn't go to the Olympics because
That's
they're
what I
having
mean.
having to play this condensed schedule. So in addition to the 9 to 10 players that participated, for the Lightning, the coaches and the GM, because of that, most of the league is now having to do something they're not used to doing, at least at the NHL level, which is to play a lot of games.
Right.
And look, if you're comfortable with that, fine. But understand too, their teams might not be playing their best hockey, and in another year where you didn't have the condensed schedule, who's to say, and I'm throwing examples out there, and Ottawa is playing better down the stretch, in addition to Tampa Bay, a little more crisp. Some other teams who are maybe like floundering because they're tired because of the schedule, maybe in another year where they didn't have that condensed schedule, it's a little bit different. So
yeah,
that's just something to point out.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I will also bring up that the fan asked about 4 to 5 days off. It's not like this is going to have a cumulative effect indefinitely. I think these players are in such great shape. If they do get a few days, it's just that there's no stop to this. It's like, as we often say, like, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, like play, recover, next game, play, recover, next game. And I mean, in a playoff series, it's like that too, but usually if you can win a series, you usually get a little bit of time in between series. And, if the Lightning do try and milk the schedule a little bit so that some of their main guys do not play on the Wednesday against the Rangers and they get 4 to 5 days, to me, that would be sufficient. Again, I'm not 24, playing in incredible shape and, playing the sport that requires so much.
Don't sell yourself short, Mish. Come on.
Physically, emotionally, everything else.
Yeah.
But, what I have seen is it's not like, well, we're tired and we need an off season to recover. That's more when you've had a deep playoff run and, physically and mentally you are drained. This is more of a short-term thing, I think.
Yeah.
And they'll get rejuvenated for the start of the playoffs. Every
they
player
do.
will.
They do. And that's why the load management, like pick a player or two who you think you can strategically sit once you clinch a playoff spot towards the end of that last week, go ahead and do it. But that's why also we were kind of optimistic that, if, when Nick Paul comes back, if and when Victor Hedman comes back, some of these players who've been banged up, when they do come back, are they going to have their legs a little bit more once the playoffs begin because they've been in and out of the lineup? That maybe I'm putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. Maybe I'm getting the math right and it's 4 and the Lightning end up taking advantage of that. I don't know. We'll see. But it was just something that caught my attention, partner, when we were hearing all of this. And I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. Look, why are we talking about this? And we're talking about it because of this Olympic break, because we shut down for the Olympics, which is something the players and coaches wanted. That's great, but understand what comes with that. This is what comes with it. And if you're okay with it and don't want to make the excuses, I'm all for it. But That's what was eating at me a little bit. Tonight, enjoy some Reif Rum, smooth, versatile, now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reif Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reif Rum by name. Go Bolts. Please enjoy responsibly. Okay, let's get to a few more questions because we have a lot coming in, and we appreciate that. Bolts fan says Lightning magic number is 7. Interesting. I'm going to take your word for it.
Yeah, because a bunch of those teams can get to 104.
Yeah.
It probably is actually less than 7 because some of those 104 teams are going to be playing each other. So it depends how many of them are going to, like, if more than 2, let's say, can't get to 104, then it's going to be 104. But they're closing in on it. The math this year is a little more complicated because we have so many teams bunched up. And by the way, I was saying couple of weeks ago, I didn't think the Flyers, don't look at the Flyers as it relates to the Lightning, because I didn't think the Flyers could catch the Lightning. I don't think the Flyers are going to catch the Lightning. The Flyers could get in, though.
They're back in it.
Yeah, the Flyers, I think, are like 8-1-1 in their last 10, so good for Rick Tocchet.
They pushed.
You know, they're playing quite well. I think they're 2 points behind Columbus for the second wild card. It is 7 right now. Thank you, Steve.
Adam says, loving the play from Emil, Bobby, or Lilleberg. Cage Lilly is a different player. Love the spark he is adding to the, what is that? The decor. Yeah, he has improved a lot lately.
I thought he was playing very well prior to his injury against the Islanders, where an Islander fell on his leg. I think it was an ankle for him. And then, you know, he came back, and he didn't play a lot. Remember, he came back after the Olympic break and only played a little bit before taking the puck to the face. So now I think we're starting to see the guy that we saw earlier this year. And he is not shy about jumping in the play. It's not the first time that he has done that when he scored that goal against Ottawa. It's just that was a very important goal. He scored a goal earlier this year in Sunrise, that first meeting between the Lightning and Panthers. Remember, he walked right into the slot and went, you know, top shelf over Bobrovsky. So he's got some offensive capabilities. I think he's known more for, you know, his physical
He's a thumper.
play.
He's a thumper.
He
reminds me, and maybe it's because they just don't have anybody like him up until Emil Lilleberg, is Chernak. Mm-hmm. I mean, Chernak and Lilleberg are your thumpers. And I actually think Lilleberg, when he hits you, he hits you.
Yeah.
I mean, he can thump it, and he can fight. We have seen that. Like, he can handle himself well. Like, Chernak will fight. I don't know if Chernak's a good fighter. I think there's a difference. I think Lilleberg, there was a point there he was being challenged a little bit, and he was responding, you know, to those. So just another small observation. Chris says Hagel playing like a guy without a cup and wants one really bad.
Yeah, you mentioned Gensel. Hagel has been outstanding.
What a
I feel that
player.
Hagel and Cirelli found another gear when the Lightning went out west. And
you've mentioned
it's hard to say that they've maintained it because the team has sagged at the beginning of some of these games, and that includes them. They're part of the team. But I think they've really taken a drive the bus type of, you know, role with the team. And of course, they had that crazy stretch with Kucherov where the line combined for 28 points, you know, in 3 games or whatever it was. But he was fantastic last night. Like, his engine is going nonstop.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a goal. He could have had 4 goals last night. Hit the post in the first period, the double doink, missed the net on a couple of good looks in the third period. Well, and he matched his total from last year, 35 goals. He and Gensel both got to 35 last night.
Like Cirelli, you've mentioned this, he drags you into the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a few players who do that. And that's been fun to watch. But he's been, what a find. Even more so, you know, we talked about Hagel and Paul both coming around at the same time, and both, I mean, Hagel's just borderline star, and that's an incredible achievement, really, when you think about it. All right, so tomorrow we are going to most likely go live.
Yeah.
I think game day, right? Lightning and Canadiens.
I think, look, they've been kind of doing the optional to the rink. I wonder if tomorrow will be closer to, if it's not a full skate, have everyone come in. We'll see. The Canadiens have had a busy schedule too, though, because they played back-to-back Nashville, Carolina over the weekend, and then they got today off, and they'll play the Lightning on Tuesday.
Do we have anybody we know in Montreal that we can
I know some people in Montreal.
Let's,
if I see them tomorrow, I'll see
maybe
if we
ask
can
them if they want to hop on.
bring them in.
It'd be interesting.
Yes.
Like, what's I mean, they've had
Cole Caulfield is certainly a big time story. He could be the first 50-goal scorer for the Canadiens since Stéphane Richer in the late 80s, early 90s. I think Brian was saying they haven't had a 50-goal scorer in 36 years.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Caulfield's a great scorer.
Yeah,
And I think Brian said he's the first U.S.-born Canadian, but as in Montreal Canadian, to score 40. I think we talked about that, right? Pacioretty got to 30, 39 or something
goals.
like that. Yeah.
A bunch of 30 goals.
He and Suzuki are a great duo.
Mm-hmm. It's nice.
They are a handful.
And they also brought back Phil Deneau. Remember when that trade happened with the Kings? He had no goals. He's up to 5, but he's more of a shutdown guy.
Right.
So I think he helps.
Well, I'll say this before we close. So they aren't identical. These teams are not identical. So don't take this to the bank. But I think that they share this quality, and Lightning have this quality too. Montreal, Buffalo, and Ottawa are all extremely dangerous in transition. They love to attack with speed, and if you are not ready for that, you could get skated out of the building, which is what happened in Nashville, against Montreal. The game in Tampa, where the Lightning were up, 3-0? Was it 3-0? 4-0? I remember the Canadiens tied it late. Lightning won in a shootout. But, I mean, the Canadiens outskated the Lightning in that game. The Lightning were fortunate to win that game. They won it in a shootout, even though the Canadiens needed basically a late face-off win and a tying goal. So the earlier meeting, the Lightning skated the Canadiens out of the building. That was the one where the Lightning jumped out to a big early lead, took the crowd, as much as you can take the crowd out of the Bell Center. But as we look ahead, I mean, again, fans are like, playoff matchup. Like, the Lightning could see a team that predicates its game on speed in the playoffs. They haven't always seen a team like that, right?
Yeah.
But Montreal definitely does it, and we know Buffalo does it. And we've seen this from Ottawa for years. They have killed the Lightning in Ottawa, especially with chances off the rush. Yep. So that's the way Montreal wants to play, and we'll see if they're going to be able to do that tomorrow.
Partner, we'll do it again tomorrow.
Great job tomorrow.
Yep. As always, thanks to Steve Versnick. Thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.